We're in Albany at the opening of the new session up here. Hi there, it's David Smith and Meet the Leaders, and we are pleased to have Kieran Lalor with us. The Republicans are no longer in command of the Senate, and as a result, Kieran, who's an Assemblyman, is pretty much in the same position he was before, but he's going to be working with Democrats on the other side of the equation as well. It's good to have you here, Kieran.
Great to be here, David.
He's a Republican, I might add, from the Hopewell Junction and Fishkill area. Do you think it's going to really make any difference to you? You've been in this position.
Here's why I think it'll make a difference.
Yeah.
In the past, I could go to a Republican senator who was in the majority and say, hey, listen, this is a good bill. Pass it. That'll give us some momentum. We can say, hey, look, the Senate passed it. Democrats and Republicans voted for it. Let's do likewise on our side of the Capitol. So in that way, it will be different.
Well, depending on the bill, of course. I mean, because most of the bills are bipartisanly passed anyway, but there are those that might be a little frictional.
But most of the bills that pass bipartisanly, in fact, most of the bills are pretty mundane.
Yeah.
The bills that are going to improve people's lives and really impact people's lives for better or worse, often they're done along partisan lines.
Let's talk about some of those bills that you have a particular parochial interest in. What is going to be one of your issues of concern?
The biggest thing that I get calls about, and I bet all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle in both houses get calls on, taxes. The thing that's driving millions of people literally in the last couple decades out of the state is high taxes, whether they're high state taxes or high local taxes, which are often driven by state policy. So how do we reduce people's tax burden but not reduce the quality of life here in New York? How do we don't want to cut bone, we want to cut fat. And what I've identified over the years is we have these so-called corporate economic development programs. I'll call it corporate welfare. And we say, hey, we're going to take tax money from around the state, we're going to give it to Company X. And Company X is going to create 1,000 jobs. And that's what they say. The ribbon gets cut. Everybody takes a pat on the back. Republicans vote for these things. Democrats vote for these things. They're there with the silver shovel, when the ground is broken. And then 2 or 3 years later, Company X, maybe they're not here anymore. Maybe the 500 or 1,000 jobs they promised are 250 jobs. Maybe they're still here, but they're saying, hey, we're going to leave if you don't give us more money. And in fact, New York State spends more than any other state on these corporate welfare programs. And yet our unemployment rate is higher than the national average. Our growth rate is lower than the national average. And one of the really pernicious side effects, a lot of your corruption scandals in this state center around these pots of money, economic development money. We saw a lot of not only indictments but convictions in the last year, all stemming back to corporate welfare. It's about $5 billion depending on who you ask. That's a huge amount of money per year. If we took some of that, half of that, ideally all of that, and use that for across-the-board tax relief for individuals and businesses all around the state, it would be a game changer. We'd be a haven for businesses. We could start building our state again, and particularly upstate. One of the things that's really a concern to me, in the past, the state Senate was focused on upstate concerns. A lot of their members were from upstate. Yeah. Now, when the 3 people go into the room, 2 men and now a woman, they're all from New York City or immediately outside New York City. I mean, for goodness sakes, the 3 people are going into the room, they could walk to each other's house. So we're going to really have to fight, whether a Democrat or Republican, for upstate interests, Hudson Valley, where I am, and further north, because the main players, the leaders of both houses and the governor, are from the New York City immediate metropolitan area, and their issues are different than upstate issues.
Sure.
They don't have agriculture issues, for example.
Yeah.
They're concerned about the MTA. We're concerned about our crumbling roads and other things. So we really need to raise our voices as upstate members of the Assembly and of the Senate to make sure that our concerns are voiced.
Yeah, the diversity of the state of New York is a two-edged sword, isn't it?
You're right.
It's good in many areas, but it also has some frictions between up and down.
And I'm kind of uniquely positioned where I am because a lot of people will agree. They don't agree on a lot of policy, but they'll agree. The Hudson Valley, Dutchess County is kind of where upstate meets downstate. In fact, it came up in the gubernatorial debate back in October. So I'm kind of in a good position to bridge that divide.
Well, we are going to watch this with great interest. We wish you the best on that.
All right, thank you.
Very interesting indeed.
My pleasure.
That's Kieran Lalor, Fishkill and Company, and he's one of the Republicans in the Assembly. He's got some interesting ideas going on, and everybody's enthusiastic about the start of the session, no question about it. From Albany, it's Meet the Leaders, and I'm David Smith.